Hello and welcome back to Munro Live. My name is Carl Crittenden and
Sue Smith.
And I was told in 30 minutes they're going to start tearing the parts off of the Rivian truck that we will be doing a complete teardown in. So we would like to go ahead and give a review of some of the interior components as we see them now, and we'll do a recap after we take them apart and really understand what we are seeing.
To be fair, 30 minutes they're going to tear some parts out, but they're going to put them back in because we still want to do a little driving in this thing.
Yep. So in review of this vehicle, Sandy and Sue did purchase one, and in theirs they were very, very happy with their interior quality, the stitching. They think that it was executed very, very well. Now this model that we are going to be tearing apart, I was going over with a few components with Sandy and he agreed that this one was probably made on a Friday afternoon. There are a few issues that would cause some people a little bit of heartburn, and we'll go through those. They might just be nitpicky things that no one but a person like me would notice, but once you see them and you purchase your Rivian, you're never not going to be able to notice. So let's go ahead and get started in the review of the interior.
And I'm going to start before we even get in and say, personally, I like all of the little yellow touches, the yellow emblem in the center of the wheel, the yellow brakes, the yellow along the edge of Rivian. I will say, this is yellow. Yellow. I do like also the yellow in the center of the steering wheel emblem. I like that there's yellow in the headrest. I kind of wish it wasn't fabric. I'd like to see the material be continuous. But I do like the kind of wild styling that there's a pop of yellow. And I know Carl has an awful lot to say on the interior, but I wanted to hit too that for free they've got a nice emblem. They've got the Rivian logo right here. It's just a little bit of tooling. And there's a lot of little Rivian logo touches here on the far side of the dash. And especially right here, it's just a simple, classy way to advertise right there. Before we go too much farther, another touch that we both love is the flashlight in the door. That even has a couple of pops of yellow. And that's just a great idea. I wish you could turn it on from somewhere on the door. That's just one more exterior light. But it sure is nice to have a torch right there, a flashlight. So Carl, I'm going to give that flashlight to you.
All right, so let's look at the interior here in the door and then also into the IP. Now, some of these videos, and when you do a walk around of the press vehicles that are given to us, I kind of hate them because I feel like I'm acting as a salesman. I'm not a salesman and I do not want to be a salesman. So I'm very excited about a vehicle that we will be tearing down because we can talk about what we were seeing and then we can get deeper into it. Let's look at the different layers in this door. We have a top roll, which is an actual cut and sewn material. There is a wood inlay. There is an armrest medallion, and you can see the layer construction between these components. We have a thermoformed material, which is your main door carrier. A deployable mat pocket, so they had to worry about how they're attaching the elastic, how they are wrapping with a fabric material, and then your thermoformed outer again. So we have all of these different layers. We have a bunch of different layers in the IP. For a design, one thing that I am very thankful that they did, if I was at least the one who had to execute this, none of these lines flow through purposefully. If you look at the door to the IP on the passenger side, you'll notice there is not a style line, there's not a stitch line, there is not a character line that flows from the door into the IP. When a designer decides to do that, it creates a headache for everyone. You end up playing a blame game. You'll have one company that's making the instrument panel, you'll have another company that's making the door. And if they don't line up in the vehicle assembly plant, everyone points the fingers. Well, the door is wrong. Well, no, the IP is wrong. Well, no, your vehicle assembly is wrong when you put them together. I've been called into the assembly plants and had to justify my position multiple times because of those flow-through designs. Whenever you design something to purposefully not flow through, that's the best of condition. But let's look at the wood inlay, and let's start here from the instrument panel. Now, I'm going to give you a little background of the way they work in the design studio. The design studio is going to come up with a surface, and it's going to be a shape. The design studio will then kick that off and say, okay, program team, design around this, and then find a supplier to make it. The program team is going to start with all these components and all these shapes, put them together, put it in thicknesses. And then eventually it gets to a supplier, and then the supplier actually has to execute it. And it's normally only by that time that they consider the materials that they selected and what happens to the materials once they're asked to match that shape. Now I want to show you this right here. This wood inlay, if you were to measure the distance from here to here, you're going to come up with an X dimension. If I measure the distance from here going onto an inset angle, then from here going onto an inset angle, you're going to have an X plus dimension. The wood will not stretch. So you can't consider it like vinyl or leather that I'm going to wrap a component and I'm just going to stretch it in. The way you have to do this is the material, when the wood is flat, is at an open angle. They'll cut it at that angle, and then once they fit it to that shape, they're going to put a slight bend in it so that they can have the excess material. Now, here's what that creates. I have straight grain line coming across this bottom. This upper portion was angled away when it was flat. When they twisted it in, all of this grain line comes in at an angle. Looks incredibly crooked. That condition only exists on this side. If you look at the passenger side, you will see that the grain on the upper and the lower portion are both straight. All right, well, how did they do that? They broke it. See the little chrome strip there? That is acting as a separation. So they're able to cut each of them in grain line, bring them together and have them straight, but they could not do that here.
Another place that you're seeing that is right here. Just like Carl just described, this distance here is X, and then coming down and down, you have X plus, and you're going forward. So if you look, all of these grain lines angle forward. These go straight across, but then when you rolled it, these roll up and they're at an angle. They don't come around nice and neat. And the other problem is this is a lot of scrap right here. There's not really going to be a good way to nest this, and so you've just scrapped a huge amount of wood.
So those are the material issues that almost never get brought up during the studio design phase. The studio designers have something in their head. They create their designs, they kick them off, they start working on the next program, and then a year later, once they go to put on a surface, they realize this is the condition that they had. Now, I'm probably ruining someone's day because there's probably some studio designers for Rivian that have never noticed this condition before because they were probably already off the program by the time they got it. Now, another thing to mention about this wood, I hate the surface finish of this wood. And I'm not talking about the color. This stuff feels like sandpaper. It feels as if I tried to clean this with a rag, it would shred the rag. Mm-hmm. Now, he'll get a close-up in a minute. There is an edge right here on the edge of the part where the wood wraps around that the wood is actually splitting and fraying. It looks like a bunch of little hairs of fiberglass sticking up. I just don't think that they did as good as they should have when you're talking about the conditioning and the finishing of the wood.
Over here, something they did that I think is a nice touch, however, is they've etched or engraved into the wood the logo, which I think is a very nice, simple, clean way to put your logo into this wood trim. I think I like this quite a bit. The only concern is that engraved like this, you're going to probably end up with some debris or dirt in there over time. I like this styling touch because, like Carl said, it facilitates a nice, clean trim piece in the wood because you can separate it. As we segue off of wood, I'd like to say personally, while I do like the pops of color, I don't like how many different materials there are here. We've got piano black, we've got wood, we've got the chrome, we have etching, we've got the vinyl, and another piece of chrome, and then right here you have thermoform, and here you have fabric.
Yep.
So there's just, for me, there's just too much going on. I love the simple, elegant, clean lines of this truck in general. I think it's a great vehicle, but there's just so much going on right here. I would like it to be much simpler, and also having chrome anywhere on the dash. If you're driving and the sun is coming here, that is more than likely going to reflect into your eyes. I don't like the idea of chrome anywhere on the dash. Also, as you can see, as we're touching this, we're leaving fingerprint impressions all over it, and any mom is going to know that they went to a brushed finish on refrigerators for that same reason.
So what I would like to do is kind of give you a little breakdown of a studio design surface and the results of the decisions that they made. This is something that I used to do in my past life. I would sit in with studio designers, and as they would come up with concepts, I would start to give them warnings. Warnings for the actual manufacturability of what is going to happen with that vehicle if they go down the path they're going down. Now, just because something is a problem, just because something can cause issues, doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it takes a lot more thought, a lot of effort, and there are certain conditions or certain problems that are inherently going to happen, and you have to be willing to accept them. So we're going to start here, and I want to talk about the stitching and how they actually manufactured this stitch. See here, this is a T-seam. This is a locked position. So if you've done any machine design and you know tolerance of assembly or datum systems, this would basically be a datum point. When I am going to wrap this door, I'm going to start there. So that would be a four-way locator. This T-seam can never be mispositioned. You can't position it forward, rearward, in, because this is fitting into a groove. So now I have a locked position right here. Then I'm coming up and I'm going into a curve. This curve is also a locked position. I cannot move this curve up or move this curve over. It's going to be outside of the seam groove. So that spot there is going to be a four-way locator. The curve again happening here. The way this material is sewn into that pattern, I cannot shift at all. That is a four-way locked position. I continue on to another curve, same type of a situation, four-way lock. Then I have another T-seam. That T-seam cannot be mispositioned. That is a four-way locked position. Now I have this straight seam coming across the top. Now the straight seam coming across the top cannot move up or down, but I could stretch it that way and reposition. So I would call that one a two-way position. Same with the seam here. That would be a two-way position. Now when you see all of these locked conditions, it tells you that this pattern must be perfect. I have a set seam here, which is in a fixed position, and I have a set seam here, which is in a fixed position. This entire length of material is now locked. If this pattern was too big, I would have a wrinkle that is trapped in here that I could not get out. So what do? They purposefully make this area of the pattern too small. That way they have to stretch it in order to wrap the material. They're willing to stretch to a certain limit just to keep it nice and flat, but they never want to have excess. Okay, well, what's bad about stretching? When I stretch this material, I stretch the seams, and you start to pull out and have these little threads cut your material. It's overextended, and it can also cause you to warp the material. So in areas where I'm only going in a two-way, I normally have a fairly nice, clean, consistent seam, but in areas of the locked four-way, the material is overstretched. On the assembly line, this adds a lot of time. So how would I design this differently? Personally, in theory, I would want to take this seam and I would want to run it off the part. That way, if I were to get rid of the locked position here and then get rid of the four-way here, I would set this seam and then all of my excess material I could pull off of the part. However, I would never want a seam to end in a radius. You always want the seams to run off on a perpendicular angle. So you're fighting against yourself. You're fighting against your tolerances. This is a type of condition that if I was speaking to the studio designers, I would say don't do this. The only thing worse than a condition like this would be a circle seam, which some studios wanted me to do, where they would want this seam to continue around, connect back to itself, and then come over. That is an entirely locked area. They do that on seating from time to time, and it's okay on seating because you don't have a locked fixed position. It can flex, but on a hard wrap, there is no flex possible. Now, in the execution of their sewing, if you were to look at this upper belt line, and if you were to sight line down the edge, you'll see this area right here, they fudged up. It is not within the seam groove, it is crooked. So if you were to angle and sight line down, you will see how wavy this entire seam is. Now there is one thing that we were talking about, and it has to do with the layering in this door. Because of the layering and because of the inset curve on the wood panel, there is a design gap of this inner panel. It's somewhat floating. Because of that design gap, you basically have a big crumb catcher. That would possibly be very difficult to clean. Things and dirt and debris would fall in there quite easily. There's nothing really stopping anything from falling out.
So coming back to the door, again, just kind of putting the mom aspect to it, there's kind of a lot going on. We've got, like I said, thermoform, vinyl. Something Carl, I don't think, mentioned is that actually the stitching on the double-sided seam, the French seams, is different color than this stitching here on the single-sided deck seam. And then there's fabric here. So when you go to grab this thing and pull it out, I love that it's expandable. I don't love that it's fabric because a lot like the chrome, you keep touching this thing. Vinyl, leather, you can wipe off. This, I think, is going to get dirty. I do like that they included a removable piece of rubber here so you can actually clean the bottom of your mat pockets. That's a great feature, but again, I'm just not a fan of the fabric here because I think it's going to get filthy. I'm going to get in on the driver's side, and for me, it's just a little bit tight. So as you're accessing the seatbelt buckle, I mean, you hop in, and I'll say it here, I like that the bottom of the steering wheel has been flattened to give you more ingress room. I think that's a great idea. But then when you talk about room, get in, go for your seatbelt buckle, and there's not a lot of room to get all the way down to your buckle. And I realize I'm wider than some people that might sit in this seat, but it's very difficult to access that seatbelt buckle. I do like that the seats are firm and they kind of hug you. I find the headrest to be in a comfortable position. And I like the material. Again, for me, there's a little bit much going on, but I think Carl has a different opinion. I see the fabric in the side here. I see fabric welt. I see fabric down the center. And if I'm going with a vinyl or a leather seat, I kind of want it all to be the same material. I don't want to see fabric on the welt and in the center detail. This is a nice touch. It's very pretty. It seems like an expensive accoutrement, though.
So right now we're trying to get a good estimation of the materials. Now we're going to be able to tear this seat apart and try and figure out what's in it, what we think the cost would be. But here's what I see right now. We have an area of perforated leather. We have a perimeter of leather. But the bolster side, I don't believe this is leather. I think this is vinyl. So immediately under your seat would be leather, and edging of leather, vinyl. That carries up through the seat back as well. Leather, vinyl, leather, leather, vinyl, leather, leather, vinyl. These are just our estimations right now. We will see once we tear it apart. As Sue had mentioned, the breakup between what I will say the mid and lower back and then the upper shoulder area, they have a plastic insert providing that breakup. I'd like to see what the cover looks like underneath that plastic insert once we can rip it out. I don't know if this is all one sewn cover with the trim panel popping in, or if these are separately sewn components that are attached between them with a trim panel popping in. So let's go to the back and talk about the back panel.
So on the back of the seat, we have this pull-out panel. I like that you could possibly remove this and pull it out further to get in there and clean. If you recall earlier, I mentioned the yellow pops. This, I like that it's a very nice, clean, bright accent. I don't like that this is, I don't know, I almost hate to call it orange, but it's certainly not yellow and it's not gold. So I would like to see that this would have been yellow chrome or yellow mirrored finish as opposed to a different color. It's incongruous to put this accent with everything else being yellow. Here, I like that we have the USB port. I love that we have what appears to be a purse hook, but it doesn't have any give to it. And if you're going to try and get a hanger in there, you're going to have a tough time. It's going to have to be a really thin, deformable wire hanger. I have a plastic hanger here, and it doesn't fit at all. In the back seat, I really like that you have access. So there's a small storage compartment here, which is a nice feature. You can tuck your cell phones in here. It's not a charger. That would have been even a nicer feature if it had a wireless charger here. But you can put your cell phones in this pocket, close the door, retain it, and then you have access all the way through into the gear tunnel. So kids are back here. They're complaining they want a snack. If you strategically put your cooler right back there, you're going to have the kids be able to reach back, get a snack while they're traveling, and this is just a great access point. And then again, you can close it with the tambour door. There's a nice little yellow arrow here, one more pop of that yellow that I like. So on the back of the front seat here, you have this nice molded panel with a soft feel grain to it. So it looks a little bit higher tech and higher quality without having to be fabric wrapped. So it kind of has that fabric grain to it without actually being fabric. I do like that this is a dark separator here instead of the bright chrome. That's really nice. And I like that they've separated, like in the front, that they continued that styling theme of a material look with a smooth look back to the material look.
So I had a little interesting thought here. I was looking at this panel, and at first I thought it was broken apart. And side shields come off quite regularly. There are actually ingress-egress tests to see how well the side shield holds in place, but I was wrong. This gap is tied to the seat function. Lots of times the tilt of the seat would be in the seat cushion itself, and what happens is the bite into what's called the bite into the STO along this edge, it would lift out of the plastic would stay in place. When you do that, you can have some BSR because you're having squeaking, and sometimes you have problems trying to tie out the trim and keep everything hidden. They actually left this loose, and that is their break point. On the one hand, I think it's neat. I haven't seen it before, and it may be done on many other vehicles. But on the other, if it is functioned like that, you have a look that is incomplete. If they were to have had this shingle and continued this A-surface underneath the front panel, maybe it would look cleaner in its movement. But the way they decided to leave these surfaces flush to each other, when it's in its full up position, it looks incomplete or broken.
While we're in that same region, I do like how they've covered the adjuster. It's completely covered and enclosed, and so you really don't see any of the track whatsoever. I think that's a very nice execution there. You just see the same look from floor all the way to top of the side shield escutcheon or bezel. So from here all the way to the floor, they've got some nice interesting detail. It's not too ostentatious or flashy. It matches their theme again, where you have a fabric-y feel, then a smooth, clean ring, and then the textured feel again. And I do like that it's super clean all the way up. Well, that's a wrap on our initial look at the interior. If you are not already a Munro Live subscriber, please hit that subscribe button, like us. We'd love to hear your comments. Overall, I think this interior is very nicely done. Again, a few things that Carl and I found a few flaws with, but all in all, I think it's a really beautiful execution in a very sleek looking vehicle with a lot of well-matched trim themes.
And soon it will be coming apart, and we'll be able to see what's behind all of the components that we just looked at. So thank you very much for watching.
Thank you for watching.